Hey everybody, welcome to Card Talk's first ever hybrid episode, an episode where we have a video here that you're watching, and then we have a written version of essentially the same information in the link down below. So you guys can click the link down below and it'll pop up a written version of this. Sometimes it's easier to access this or to follow along if it's written down, or it's sometimes easier to read. There are many opinions out there on what players should buy first in terms of, the most bang for your buck. Dan Prinz over at Vision of the Volunteer, we call him Dern's father. He has a what to buy blog on his site. You can look at Ian Martin at Tales from the Cards, and he has a new player buying guide over there, and both of those resources are amazing. So this isn't designed to be the be-all and end-all, but this is my opinion about maybe what you should get if you're a new player looking to buy things. At Card Talk, we think the more information that you have, the better decisions you can make. The better decisions you make, probably the better experience you will have in the game. Before we get started into the recommendations, I think it's important to understand how the game is laid out. There are 3 types of content for the game, okay? The first type of content is what I'll call as the cycle content, or the cycles of the game. Okay, there's a whole bunch of those cycles. Each cycle kind of stands alone to tell its own story. At the beginning of the game, with the core set and some of the earlier cycles, the story was a little bit looser. As the game grew and expanded, each cycle told a more tightly pieced together story, and is kind of culminates with the Vengeance of Mordor cycle. But in each cycle, there's 1 deluxe box and 6 adventure packs. The deluxe box contains a slew of player cards and then 3 scenarios. So there's a lot of bang for your buck in a deluxe box. Then each adventure pack will contain a few player cards and then 1 scenario. Now, the scenarios in the adventure pack need the corresponding deluxe to be played. Okay, so if you just bought the core set and then you buy the next adventure pack, which is the Hunt for Gollum, you need components or cards from the core set to play Hunt for Gollum. Okay, and so as you buy more adventure packs and cycle content, you'll understand how it goes. Okay, now there's very little crossover with cycle to cycle. Okay, so you're not going to need the second cycle to play the third cycle. So each cycle is in itself kind of standalone. Okay, the second type of product is the Saga product, or the Saga expansions. There's 2 Saga expansions. Okay, there's the Hobbit Saga, which consists of 2 boxes, and these are big boxes. So there's 3 scenarios in each box for a total of 6 scenarios, and each of those boxes have a bunch of player cards. Okay, and then there is the Lord of the Rings Saga, which is probably the gold standard of the game. Okay, if you're looking for super thematic, super awesome way to play the game, you are looking at the Lord of the Rings Saga. That consists of 6 boxes, again, each with 3 scenarios in it, and each having several heroes and a bevy of player cards. Okay, and then the last type of product is going to be the print-on-demand type of product. Print-on-demand product was released or is being released for special events like Gen Con and fellowship events. And so that those only contain 1 scenario and only have encounter cards in it. It's only scenario. You don't get any player cards in those print-on-demands. I'm also going to include Nightmare in the print on demand category. So there's a mode of play called Nightmare, which if you buy the Nightmare pack, it makes the game mainly more difficult, or in some cases it fixes critical errors that were overseen when the game was being developed. Okay, and so so we're not going to necessarily talk a ton about print on demand content, but I will include it a little bit. Okay, so but if there's a specific scenario that you absolutely love, then it may be worth trying to find the Nightmare scenario for it to make it even more challenging. Okay, so one last note I will say before we get started is that this is going to include spoilers. So I'm going to, if you've never seen an episode of Card Talk, you'll notice that I put cards that I mentioned right over here so that you can know what you're looking at. So let's just jump in here. Here we go. Okay. Before we talk about actual recommendations to begin with, there are some products that I think you should just buy if you can find it. If you see it for sale, buy it immediately. Okay. And so these adventure packs include the Steward's Fear and Foundations of Stone. Okay. The Steward's Fear adventure pack is an adventure pack that includes kind of like a deck in a box. It really has all the heroes and allies, or the hero and allies that you would need to make an Outlands deck. And so whether you're a veteran and you love or hate Outlands, for new people, getting the Steward's Fear is something that they would want to look for. It's the first AP in the Against the Shadow cycle, which is the third cycle of the game. Okay, so it usually sells out very, very quickly. Another adventure pack you'll want to get, if you see it, is Foundations of Stone. Foundations of Stone is the fifth adventure pack of the Dwarf cycle. It contains Spirit Glorfindel, and Spirit Glorfindel is maybe one of the first OP heroes in the game. And so I say OP meaning overpowered. It doesn't break the game, but it sure changes the power curve in the game and slants it a lot toward the players. Okay. Another AP that sells out is, again, in the second cycle of the game, the Dwarf cycle. It's called Shadow and Flame, and this pack contains Elrond and Vilya, which is probably, by all accounts, a hero attachment combination that is very thematic, but is also considered maybe one of the highest power combos in the game. A couple other APs that seems to be sold out a lot is the Dead Marshes. That's the fifth adventure pack in the first cycle, the Shadow of Mirkwood cycle. That has Boromir in it, and Boromir hero is pretty good, especially early game in the early card pool. And he's also a fan favorite. A lot of people love Tactics Boromir. And for somebody who is playing Hobbits, it contains Fast Hitch, which is definitely a staple in the Hobbit building archetype. And the other thing, and I don't know exactly why this is, but it seems like the Dwarf cycle, more than anything, is usually sold out. As I've perused the forums and looked at stuff, it just seems like the Dwarf cycle, which is the second cycle in the game, just seems to be sold out more than any other cycle. So that's so if you're desperate, pick that up. A couple other product that seems to be always sold out are Saga products, the Black Riders, which is the first box in the Lord of the Rings. This also has kind of a deck in a box. This is the Hobbit archetype in a box. It comes with 4 Hobbit heroes, and it's also, because it's the first of the Lord of the Rings Saga boxes, a lot of people start there and then buy it first. So if you see the Black Riders, you may want to pick it up. And then the last box that if you see and you want, and you just know that it's going to sell out, it's called Flame of the West, and that's the 5th box in the LOTR Saga, and that has maybe the most overpowered and awesome hero in it, Tactics Awen. Okay, she is maybe the best hero in the game. So that's one of the reasons why people buy the Flame of the West. Those are things, if you're just going to buy, if you just need to buy stuff, those are things to get if you see them. Okay, now I'm going to say that a lot of this recommendation doesn't hold if you're just going to try to collect the whole thing and get it as fast as you can. But there's a whole segment of new players like you who are watching this that want to collect it over time, and you just kind of want to hear what a veteran player has to say. So that's where this comes in. Okay, so you have the core set. Now what do you get? Okay, so with all of those exceptions and the game setup aside, let's start. Okay, if I were a new player and I were buying something, knowing what I know now, I would suggest that after you buy one core set, you don't have to buy anything more than one core set. Okay, I would definitely try to fill out the rest of the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle. Okay, there's 6 adventure packs that go along with that cycle, and you don't have to buy them all at once. They're usually around $15 US. Okay, a little more, a little less sometimes. But I think that those adventure packs are key in understanding how the game works. The 6 APs are the Hunt for Gollum, Journey to Roscoble, Conflict at the Carrick, the Hills of Emyn the Dead Marshes, and then Return to Mirkwood. Those 6 encompass the 6 adventure packs in the Shadow of Mirkwood cycle. The deluxe box is the core set. Okay, so why do I think that you should probably fill out the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle before buying anything else? It builds a broader card pool while building a card pool that can beat the scenarios that are given. If you skip over stuff, sometimes your card pool has gaps and you need certain things, and you may find yourself being frustrated when you're playing later scenarios. Okay, and I think another reason why you would want to fill out the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle is because you get to see lots of different ways that the scenarios can beat you. Okay, you've bought in the core set, so you've seen a couple of ways. You have a boss enemy in the first round with the Hill Troll. You have the impossibly difficult Escape from Dol Guldur where a hero gets captured. Okay, but imagine releasing 4 trolls in the end of a scenario that you have to kill. Okay, that's Conflict at the Carrick. 9 years later, that is still one of the best scenarios in the game, in my opinion. Okay, and of course, there's some that people say aren't very good. You can talk about a Journey to Roscoble and the Hills of Emyn, but while those have their place in the card pool, I think playing them gives you an idea that, oh my goodness, I can get location locked, and that's a way I can lose the game. And it can be frustrating because you don't expect to lose that way, but that's frustrating. And then a Journey to Roscoble is definitely one of those that is one that you have to play. It's kind of a second rite to passage in terms of playing. Okay. Also in this scenario, when we're talking about player cards, you're going to get things like Dine Ironfoot. Okay, he's pretty popular when you're building dwarves, and he's probably one of the very first really strong heroes that help as an engine to building a dwarf archetype. I talked about Fast Hitch and Boromir. You can get a lot of eagles, which is nice because eagles are very good allies to have. I mean, there's a lot of great allies, but the eagle archetype is kind of fleshed out a little in that first cycle. There's a lot of great basic attachments that help in deck building in the early life of the game. So things like songs that grant other spheres of influence, like the Song of Wisdom or the Song of Travel. Okay, those are helpful to no end. Now, We get it. Sometimes those aren't available. Sometimes they're just sold out and you can't find them. So if the first cycle of APs are not available, you may just want to move on and come back when you get a chance. And so if they're not available, I would suggest to go one of three ways. Okay. The first thing that I would do is I would look and see if the Dwarf cycle is available. That's the second cycle in the game. And again, I think it's important to go on and see how the game kind of took on a life of its own. Okay, you can see how the designers were getting more careful about what they were putting out there. You can see again more new ways that the encounter deck can get you, and that's pretty good, right? And so, I think the quests are also a lot of fun to play. They kind of stand up to the test of time. Okay. And so a lot of the player cards in this, again, as you're expanding your card pool, will play off of Dying Ironfoot. You get a lot of dwarf synergy cards that work well with the dwarf archetype. Okay. And having Dine from the previous cycle is key. Okay. Other cards that work really well or are staples from this cycle are Elrond's Council. It's a 0-cost card, and you need a unique Noldor, and you get +1 willpower, and it reduces your threat by 3. So to have something that powerful early on in the card pool, as being a 0-cost card, it's pretty good. And then I mentioned before, Spirit Glorfindel, or sometimes people call it Sporfindel. Okay. Spirit Glorfindel is a great hero, 5 cost. You can't go wrong with that. And then in that same pack, the Foundations of Stone AP is a card that helps mitigate the downside of Spirit Glorfindel, called Light of Valinor. Okay. And then just a note of history, when this combo first came out, there was many people in the community that thought that this combination was broken. It just took over because it was such an overpowered combination. I will hesitate to say that it's a broken combination, but I will say that even 8 years after its release, it's still a very strong combination. And then Asphalloth is Glorfindel's horse, and that was also released in this adventure pack, The Foundations of Stone. And just a note on Asphalloth is probably Asphalloth is the single biggest card, maybe next to Thor's Map, that's responsible for changing how locations work in the game. Okay, Asphalloth puts 2 progress on any location, and so whenever the designers designed a location afterwards, they always had to keep in mind Asphalloth and what it can do. Daron's Runes is probably a card draw staple, and that's really important. Card draw may be the most important engine in any deck, so Daron's Runes is really good. And then Arwen Umdomiel, the ally, and it's from the Watcher in the Water scenario, is just maybe one of the best allies in the game. And probably the best ally in the game when you have a limited card pool, if you're just starting at the core set. Okay, so the summary of this cycle is that it really just basically hits on all cylinders. It gives a lot of what the players want in terms of their decks. It gives really good quests, and I mean, just a really good gaming experience. Okay, so if you're looking to move on from the Shadows of Mirkwood and Dwarf is not available, I think you can equally move to the Hobbit Saga quests. Okay, again, the Hobbit Saga is divided into 2 boxes. There's the Overhill and Underhill box, and then there's the On the Doorstep box. Okay, these quests were play tested pretty heavily with people that just own the core set and the corresponding box. Okay, so if you're looking to get into a really thematic way to play the game, maybe this is the way you want to go. Okay. It's also the first product that was released that was designed by Caleb Grace, who is the kind of the legacy designer of the game. He designed the most content for the game for the years that the game was still active. And so the reason why I say that this was play tested heavily with just the core set and the Hobbit boxes is because I think that as the card game grew and grew and grew to 9 cycles and 8 saga boxes, it just became more and more difficult to play test the game with only the core set. Okay. And so I think if you're a new player and you're looking to get in and you try some later scenarios or you jump off into the LOTR Saga, you can do that. But I think that starting at the Hobbit saga will be something that is really kind of likely to be an enjoyable experience. Okay. So I will say, and this is my caveat, is that there are a couple scenarios that do maybe are most frustrating. My least favorite scenario in the game is in this in the Hobbit saga. Okay. Not to say that it's not thematic. It's just it can be a challenge. So while there are some great thematic hits, there's also a miss or two here. But one of the neat things is it gives you kind of a campaign feel because you earn treasure that's thematic. You earn Orcrist and Sting and Glamdring, and you carry those through from scenario to scenario, and you end up with an extra Hobbit hero that can search for those at the beginning of the game. So while it's not exactly the campaign that you would feel in other card games or for the Lord of the Rings saga, that's a complete campaign that carries over, you get that a little bit of a flavor of what it's like to have things carry over from one quest to the next. Okay, a couple of things that you get in the Hobbit boxes if you are looking for some suggestions. Again, you're going to end up with a lot of dwarves because the boxes follow along with the book. You're not going to find Hero Tariel in this, okay? So, sorry everybody. So you're going to find in the things that go along in the book, and of course, Dine Ironfoot from the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle is again a great card to have here. Okay, so from the first box, the Overhill and Underhill box, you're going to find a very good tale, which is really great. And it's super thematic because it takes its name from when the dwarves were coming in 2 by 2 into Beorn's hall, and Beorn said, "This must be a very good tale that you have to tell Gandalf." And I'm paraphrasing that. I'm not sure exactly what he says, but that's pretty much it. And then there's Beorn, which is maybe the first hero that throws kind of the mechanics of the game on its head. Beorn doesn't quest. He's immune. He can't have any player card attachments. And he's immune to player card effects. Actually, there's a blog, Hall of Beorn, and he has a card search. And on his card search, he has a whole category of cards that's dedicated to just cards that can support Beorn because of his strange ways that he interacts with the deck. Other cards are Foe Hammer, and maybe to a lesser extent Goblin Cleaver. They're super thematic, but Foe Hammer is one of those cards that you need if you are running a tactics deck for card draw. You get to draw 3 cards with Foe Hammer. Goblin Cleaver does direct damage and is sometimes nice because it doesn't just do 1 damage, it does 2 or 3 damage, and sometimes that's just enough. Okay. Another card is Thror's Map. And so Thror's Map just really just makes life so much easier, even though it was errated. So it originally came out and then it was changed to be less powerful, and that's the card that you would be getting in that box. But even the arid version is still super good. Avoiding travel effects is something that you'll want to do. And then from on the doorstep, or the second Hobbit Saga box, will be King Under the Mountain. It doesn't seem good or overly good when you read it, but if you play it, you'll understand. King Under the Mountain is really good for dwarf decks. Well, it's really good for a lot of decks, but dwarf decks especially. And then the Black Arrow is, again, it's not necessarily a game changer in terms of its play, but I think it just really hits the mark on its theme, and so I thought I would include it on this list. And so lastly, I will just wrap up my Hobbit Saga suggestions just by saying, if you're looking for something that's super thematic, and you've played the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle and you're like, oh, I wish I could play something that's super thematic and how things work and, you know, name cards, you know, like this is where I think you would want to go. Okay, so now let's say you can't get the Dwarf Elf cycle, or you can't get the Hobbit Saga for some reason. Another option that may sneak in under the radar is you may want to go to the 7th cycle in the game, called the Arid Mithrin cycle. Okay, so again, that's going to consist of a big box called the Wilds of Rhovanion, and then 6 subsequent adventure packs. Okay, and so it's nice because while most cycles are standalone and they kind of need cards from the deluxe to run each individual AP, this not only takes cards and you need cards from the deluxe box, but it also takes cards from the core box, puts it into your encounter deck. Okay, and to me that's really cool. It's a callback, and it's a way to kind of remember. And so for veterans like me, when that was released, and all of a sudden I've been playing for 5 years, and then I'm going back to fighting the Hill Troll. That was a lot of fun. I mean, it was horrible because the Hill Troll brings up so many, so many memories, but it was definitely a lot of fun. So you may want to look at the Wilds of Rhovanion box. Now, this also kind of contains its own archetype within the box, so you don't necessarily need a ton of cards to make this archetype work. The Dale archetype is real strong. It's really flexible enough to beat a lot of different scenarios. And not only that, it's flexible enough that you can add cards to it and make it kind of your own Dale deck. And so it's kind of customizable on all sorts of levels. Okay. And then another reason why you may want to get this cycle is because it's the cycle that focuses on dragons. There's lots of dragons. Okay. And another thing that happens later on in the game's life is that there's a narrative story that designers are trying to tell. And so the narrative picks up here. But if you're playing strictly for narrative reasons, like you don't have the cycle previous and you want to know what that narrative is, you may want to hold off on getting this cycle. Okay. Why would you want to pick up this cycle? Because of that Dale archetype. You're going to get things like King of Dale, Bard, son of Bran, Bran, son of Bane. Okay. All found in this, and those things really fuel the Dale archetype. One of the things that I'm a fan of is guarded cards. So these cards are powerful, but they come at the expense of having to reveal another encounter card. And as my co-host Ted would say, encounter cards are bad. So while they may be one cost or no cost, there's an added cost of revealing an extra encounter card. And so that changes a little bit of how you want to play. And I'm always looking for that new sort of fun twist that the designers made in how to play the game. Reforged is from the Fate of the Wilderland AP, and that's the last AP in the cycle. And this card really gives new life to attachments that get discarded. And so it allows you to bring attachments back into your hand. And so think about it as a stand and fight for attachments. And then another card that I'm a big fan of is the spirit version of Dying Ironfoot. And so he's in the 4th AP of the cycle, the Ghost of Framsburg. That scenario isn't necessarily the most fun to play. It takes a long time, but the hero is definitely a lot of fun and is maybe one of the best defenders in the game. So the cycle itself has a lot of really good cards in it. So when you open up the cycle, you may feel like it's your birthday. You just keep opening them and opening and opening up. But again, I kind of would expect that because this is a later cycle in the development of the game. This is the 7th cycle. It's not the 2nd cycle. Okay. So now let's say you've purchased some or all of what I've suggested there to purchase after the core set. Okay. At this point in the game, if you're looking to buy more, then you're probably hooked, and you probably wouldn't mind buying a second core set at this point. Okay. Not that you need a second copy of Brock Iron Fist. Okay. But you can use that Brock Iron Fist as proxies for other cards. And sometimes people don't want to use proxies. Okay. So if you buy cards, you may want to buy a second core set for extra Test of Wills, for extra Stewards of Gondor, because at this point you may want to have more than one physical deck put together. Okay. And another thing you may want to consider is buying the limited edition 2-player starter if it's still in print. Now, this is one of those things that when I made this video, it's in print, but because it says limited edition, it may not be in print or may not be available. So that said, the limited edition starter has all the cards are in print somewhere in the game, but they are all expanded and alt art cards. So, and the designers put the decks together to play as kind of a standalone product. It's the only product that actually has just 2 scenarios in it. And the scenarios are actually a lot of fun, and it's it may start your interest in buying the alternate art stuff. Okay. So with that little interlude, you may want to think about going in one of 2 directions. Okay. The first direction that you may want to go into is starting the Lord of the Rings saga. Okay. Maybe you've dipped your toes into the Hobbit saga, and you're like, okay, I really like this theme. At some point, you are going to want to play this. Even if you're not a fan of the lore of the game. Okay, what this does is it takes 18, or if you're counting print on demand's 20 scenarios, and it weaves them all together in a tapestry that allows you, the player, to play through the whole Lord of the Rings books. Okay, now if that's not enough, because it's a campaign mode, there's rules that govern your play from scenario to scenario and allow you to carry things over and win boons and earn burdens that affect your play for multiple scenarios. And so this is quite possibly kind of the best experience you're ever going to have. Again, there are 6 LOTR Saga boxes. There are 2 PODs that fill out the saga, the saga, and that's the Old Forest and Fog on the Barrow Downs. Okay, and if you know anything about the lore of the game, those would be purchased after you purchase the Black Riders box. Okay, now they don't have any player cards in them, But the scenarios, if you're looking for the scenarios, this is going to give you the most complete saga campaign experience. Okay, so in the Black Riders box, you get a Hobbit. You get a Hobbit build in a box again. Okay, you get Sam Gamgee, who is one of my favorite heroes in the game. You get Lore Pippin, which is a great Hobbit, and then Tactics Mary. And I mean, these Hobbit heroes really just are staples in Hobbit decks that people build. There's the Dagger of Westerness is an attachment, and like most weapons, it works. It's really well, but it works really well with hobbits. And then when you move on to the Road Darkens box, now you're getting into Hero Gandalf. Okay, so Hero Gandalf is what I describe as the hero that we didn't know we needed. He's the only neutral hero, and he comes with all his toys. And then the Road Darkens box also includes Ally Boromir. I like this guy. Maybe I like him because he fits with hobbits so well, or maybe I just like that his art makes him look like he's in a wheelchair. But I don't know. The next box is the Treason of Saruman box, and that has Ally Gimli, which is a great leadership card on most levels. And he not only fits into a dwarf deck, obviously, but he also kind of fits into a lot of decks, and he can really help out a lot. And then Ally Legolas is in the Treason of Saruman box as well, and he is one of the only other options other than Foehammer that gives you card draw and tactics. So, and again, like Gimli, Ally Legolas isn't restricted to just being played in a Sylvan or Elf deck. Of course, he fits in there, but you don't have to play him. And then a lot of people really like the Quick Beam Ally. So, guy with 3 attack that can come out right away and do a lot of damage. In my opinion, in terms of not gameplay, but in terms of player cards, you end up having maybe the weakest of all the boxes, the Land of Shadow box. Has a lot of support for cards or for deck types, but doesn't have anything that necessarily stands out to me as cards that you must have in order to build decks. But by this point, you're already four boxes into buying the saga, so you're not getting it necessarily just for the player cards. You're getting it for the scenarios at this point. But then we turn around and get to the Flame of the West box, which I talked about at the beginning of the recording. The Flame of the West box is awesome because it has Tactics Eowyn and Spirit Baragon. And Spirit Baragon probably rivals Spirit Dine as one of the best defenders in the game. Then the last box is the Mountain of Fire box, and the Mountain of Fire box has Rosie Cotton, again, for hobbits. You need Rosie in a Hobbit deck. She doesn't work in anything else other than a Hobbit deck for the most part, but at least she works in a Hobbit deck. If you aren't quite ready for the sagas, which you may not be, because maybe you want to expand your card pool, maybe you don't want to play the books, maybe you don't want to go through the scenarios in the books because that's overplayed, whatever, to each their own, and that's fine. I would suggest going to the Dream Chaser and the Horadrim cycle. Okay, either one of those is going to be fine. Okay, now for me, I prefer the Horadrim cycle, but if you take a poll in the community, they probably prefer the Dream Chaser cycle. The Dream Chaser cycle is named after a boat that is a ship objective card in the cycle, and that should tell you what you need to know, is that in this case you are playing on boats, which hits thematically because the elves are drawn to the sea, and there's a lot of sea references in Tolkien's work, so playing on the sea is pretty good. Okay. The Horadrim takes place in the south of Middle-earth and takes place in the desert, so there's a lot of temperature mechanics and things like that. Okay, now what I like about the Dream Chaser cycle is that it really changes your perspective on how the game works a little bit. So there's a lot of unique and pretty entertaining scenarios in the Dream Chaser cycle, but the Herodrum cycle for me is the one that does it because I like the playing through the wilderness, and it has Escape from Umbar, which is one of my favorite play testing scenarios, and it has the Mumakil, which is the first AP of that cycle, and the Mumakil has a side quest in it called Welcome to the Jungle, and that's a lot of fun. So either of those is fine to go to. So now that we've worked through all of this and we're, almost finished, there's not necessarily a ton to recommend. Okay. So here's the thing. There's the Angmar Awakened cycle, and that is maybe the next thing to get on the list. That contains probably one of the hardest regular scenarios in the game, the Battle of Karn Dûm. But the deluxe box, the Dread Realm, contains Arwinum Domiel, which is a fan favorite in the community. Maybe fighting with Tactics Eowyn is one of the strongest heroes in the game. It fuels its own archetype, the Noldor discard archetype, and then also in that same cycle is the Treachery of Rudar, which is the 4th AP, and that gives us Aristor, and Aristor is another one of those heroes like Bjorn that tosses deck building on its side in order to keep up with what his ability is. Okay, so if you're looking for some fun deck building options, the Dread Realm is it. Okay. So here's the thing. It wouldn't hurt to really, as you're going through, and you're kind of at this third stage of buying stuff, is, buying some nightmare packs. Maybe you want to buy, the core set nightmare packs, which make Passage Through Mirkwood something a little more fun to play instead of kind of a training quest. Maybe you want to revisit the Hill Troll. Okay, now's the time. Maybe before you've completed your whole regular collection, maybe you want to see if nightmares are the place to go. The Hills of Emyn Muil is a good nightmare pack to get your feet wet in, because it keeps the flavor of the Hills of Emyn Muil, but makes it a little more challenging and not so frustrating. Okay. So, and then lastly, and I purposely leave this last, is because I just get frustrated with the Against the Shadow cycle and the Ringmaker cycle. The quests are fun, but I would say they're not necessarily notable. Although there are a couple that are fan favorites. Again, I mentioned one at the beginning of this. It's Steward's Fear. Okay, but you've made it this far. Let me say just a couple of things. Okay, is you do not want to start with the final cycle, the Vengeance of Mordor cycle, because if you buy the Vengeance of Mordor cycle with the expectation to play it, and you buy it kind of out of turn, you are going to be very frustrated. It's very, very difficult. The scenarios are. But to contrast with very difficult scenarios, the player cards are actually phenomenal. And so you actually get to see a One Ring player card, which is super fun to play and super thematic. And so you can imagine if you're a hero and instead of, you can actually figure out if what would happen if Boromir had the One Ring. Okay. And also in the cycle, you see contracts. Okay. So this changes deck building probably for the next 30 years for most players. Okay. So the player cards are super powerful, but the scenarios are really unforgiving. Okay. But that said, the designers did that on purpose. Caleb Grace, the designer, the designer of the game, the primary designer of the game, said that this is sort of his love letter to the diehard community, so that they can continue to play this game over and over and over again and still have fun with it. So there you have it. That's it. That's my new player buying guide and what you should buy and the best advice that I can give you and why you should buy certain things in a certain order. If you're a new player, maybe this is the thing that will help you make a decision. But make sure you research the stuff that you want to buy and go out there and get what you want and enjoy. The most important thing is to enjoy this game, because that's what it's meant to be, is an enjoyable, awesome experience. Have a great day, everybody. Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube. And there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.